Okay, welcome everybody to Go in 5 Minutes episode 6. Today we're going to be talking about unit testing our net HTTP handlers. Before we get started, I want to share some really exciting news. I just got goin5minutes.com up and running. There's some really great content there and I'm going to always be updating it. And today I want to point out that we have a newsletter that we just launched as well. So if you go to goin5minutes.com/subscribe, I'm going to be sending out an email every time there's a new screencast. In the email, I'm going to have some supporting links and some extra content that you won't be able to find just on these screencasts. So let's get started. If we remember back to episode 0, that was the very first episode, and that was talking about testing all different levels of our stack using mocks. Today we're going to be focusing in on testing just our handlers, and this is important because there are two different levels of testing our handlers. The first is with HTTP test, which is a standard library package, and that is used to test just the handler and nothing else. The second is with testserve, which is a package I wrote, and that is for testing the handler and the router together. And you'll see why that's important shortly. So let's get into our example. As you can see here, it's a very simple API server that exposes two endpoints that proxy to the GitHub API. I have a server running here on port 8080, and I'm going to run the two curl commands against it to show off those two endpoints. So here is one that outputs an octocat and ASCII, and the second one is going to output, as you'll see, all of the issues and the number of comments on each issue in this repository. So that's all the server does, but the interesting part, of course, is in the handler. So here's the first handler. This simply just calls the octocat endpoint on GitHub and then returns it. The test for the handler uses something called an HTTP test response recorder. Now, response recorder is an implementation of response writer. So along with that and the request, which is just fake, we can pass those two things into our handler, which we created on line 27 and passed in on line 28. And once the handler's serve HTTP function runs, we can then inspect the response recorder. Now, the response recorder has a lot of data in it about the response that was returned. We only showed a little bit of it here, but there's a link down here on line 47, so you can go check out the other pieces of data that it returns and you can inspect. So let's go into our second handler. This one is the issues handler, and the important bit here is we call mux.vars. Now, this is the place in our handler that we rely on the Gorilla Mux router, because the router stores the data of the requests that will be returned by mux.vars. So because of that, unless we emulate the functionality of the Gorilla Mux router, we can't directly test this handler. We have to test it alongside the router. Below, just to finish out this handler, you can see it grabs the organization and the repo name from the path, and then it does the GitHub API call, a little bit of transformation, and then returns the JSON. So let's get on to testing this handler. Now, this handler's test is actually a little bit simpler. Again, because we need to test the router and the handler together, we create the router for all of our paths and all of the handlers. We pass that router into a testserve.startServer call, and that starts a server that's run in the same exact process on a different Go routine. And if you call a normal HTTP GET call against that server's URL, which is at localhost on some port, if you call the right path, which is right here on line 38, you can exercise the handler as if it executed in a real production setting. So the request data will go through the HTTP server and then through the Gorilla Mux router and all the way down to the handler, and the handler will execute exactly as if it was running in production. After we're done with that, we call accept_end to get all the requests, at most one request or none if there wasn't one ready within a second. And then, of course, later you can go on to inspect those requests and the responses for each request. But for now, we've elided all those details just to keep this test case a little bit simpler. So that's all for today. I encourage you guys to go into your code and check out if there's a place where you can use testserve, or you can use HTTP tests, response recorder, or any other pieces inside of HTTP test. It's a very, very useful library, and of course, unit testing your handlers is a very, very important thing if you're running a web server of any kind. And then a final reminder, I want to encourage you guys again to go sign up for that newsletter. This is going to be a really, really important resource. Not only am I going to keep you guys up to date about new screencasts, but I'm also going to be evolving these newsletters to have a lot more useful and important content in them. So that's all for today, and I'll see you guys next week.